page 8. Page 8 in our magazine's 5th grade. Now, we're going to be talking today about the Virginia colony. So remember, we have all these countries who are coming over to North America and saying, hey, this is our land, and in order to keep it our land, we are establishing a colony of people. Excuse me, I drank some coffee too fast. Okay, so one of these colonies was the Virginia colony, so we'll be talking about the Virginia colony. We're also going to talk a little bit about the true story of Pocahontas and John Smith, because I think most of us have seen the Disney movie of Pocahontas. Some of it's true, some of it not so much. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. So I'd like you to follow along with me as I read the big caption for the Virginia colony. Gold, silver, copper. Who could resist the treasures of the Americas? Not the English. Queen Elizabeth I saw what Spain was taking from its colonies, and she wanted the same for England. Remember how someone said they found gold and all those people from Spain were like flocking to the Americas because they wanted gold of their own? Well, other countries saw this as well, including England. She encouraged English sea captains to attack and plunder Spanish ships carrying treasures to Spain. So instead of saying, hey, explorers, I want you to go over and try to see if you can find your own gold, she said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to attack the Spanish ships and take the gold and silver that they have found already. England also wanted its own colonies that would send back raw materials, such as lumber. Raw materials are resources that can be turned into finished products and sold for profit. So, for example, lumber that's wood, you can make furniture out of that, right? So furniture costs money, so they could use lumber for that. England's first attempts to establish a colony were failures. In 1585, about 100 colonists arrived on Roanoke Island in an area that had been named Virginia. When they ran low on food, all of them sailed back to England. 2 years later, John White brought another group to Roanoke. This group also ran low on food, and White returned to England for more supplies. But when he returned, the colony was deserted, meaning when he returned to Roanoke, the Roanoke colony, no one was there. And even to this day, no one knows what happened to the Roanoke colony. If anyone ever refers to the lost colony, that's the one they're talking about, because no one knows what happened to those settlers. The only clue he could find was the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. Croatoan was the name of another island in a group of American Indians. Did the colonists go to the island to live with the Indians? Did the Indians attack them? No one knows for sure. Groups of American Indians had greeted the Roanoke colonists. Some were friendly and others were not. So no one knows what exactly happened to those colonists. If we look on the top of page 8, we have another caption here, and I would like you to follow along with me. So this is, I think, Jamestown. So Jamestown was not a good place for a settlement. The land was low and swampy, bringing mosquitoes and the diseases they carried. And you guys, during this time, did they have vaccines or medicine to help with like West Nile virus and stuff? No. So if they got bit by a mosquito carrying a disease, they would most often die. In addition, many of the men were not interested in farming. They had come to get rich. They did not know how to hunt and fish in their new home. Does that seem smart, to go to a new land and not know how to hunt or fish? That doesn't seem very smart to me. The first winter, over half of them died because they didn't know how to farm, hunt, or fish. In September of 1608, John Smith became president of the colony. He made an important rule. Anyone who did not work did not eat. For a time, the men put their attention to survival rather than finding riches. So you guys, there was an actual John Smith. He did become leader of the Jamestown colony. And as leader, he said, all right, if you're not willing to help with the work, you don't get to eat. Do you think that sounds like a fair rule? Yeah. Yes, it does. So for a time when he was ruling the colony or in charge of the colony, that was their rule. If you're not going to help with the work, you don't get to have the labor of the work or the food. So if we see here, we can see, men helping, right? Do you think that's probably because of John Smith's rule? They're helping with the work? Yeah, exactly. All right, so on page 9, Let's read about, okay, Jamestown, the map, that caption there. It says, even though 2 attempts to colonize Virginia had failed, English merchants still wanted what the land had to offer. With the permission of King James I, they set up the Virginia Company. Each merchant bought stock or a share of the ownership of the company. It's kind of like how today, if you've ever heard of the stock market, people can purchase stocks or shares in a company. So if you have enough money, you could buy a share of Apple. And then if Apple's doing well and earning money, you could earn money. But that also means if they're not doing well, you could lose money. So each merchant would buy stock in this company. Each would share in any profits. In 1607, the Virginia Company sent 105 men to Virginia. They sailed into Chesapeake Bay and up a river they named in honor of the king. On the banks of the river, they established the Jamestown colony. So we can see on this map where the Jamestown colony was. And do you notice where Roanoke Island was? That's where that lost colony we were talking about, that's where they had set up a colony and then vanished. So it's not too far from Roanoke. Richie.
Have people visited there?
Yes. I think they have like historical places there. I mean, you guys, if you ever go to the East Coast around this area, there are so many really cool historical places to visit that are all about the establishment of the colonies. So I highly recommend if you're ever on the East Coast and you're around like Virginia and that area, visit some of these places where you can see original sites where settlers and colonists were. So yes, there are things set up on Roanoke Island for people to visit. Again, they don't have a lot of information because, like it said, when he came back, they just were all gone. All that was there was the carving of that word, Croatoan, and no one knows what that means. Elena.
My cousins live in Virginia.
Cool. So maybe they've visited those places before, or if you ever visit them, you can visit some places too. That'd be very cool. Chanel.
My mom used to live at the Washington D.C. side of Maryland. So,
Yeah.
when she has like a week where she has this shift where she gets like a week off of work,
Cool.
and those weeks we like go visit with her, try to imagine it.
That is awesome. So I bet you learned a lot and saw a lot when you were visiting them. Yes. Awesome. Will, is your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's like just was that the only thing left?
Yeah, that was the only thing left. Like the camp had been abandoned, no one was left. All that he could find was Croatoan carved into that, I think, tree he had said, or that post.
Did they like burn down like
I don't think it was burnt down. It's as if everyone left everything as it was and left. So that's why it's such a mystery. And even to this day, historians are still trying to figure out what on earth happened to the Roanoke colony. No one knows. So it's a big mystery.
got eaten by bears?
Well, there are some people who say that, like, if you visit there at night, you can hear the voices of the spirits of the colony. Of course, we don't know if that's true, but there's lots of theories. It could be that they went to live with some American Indians because if they were having a harsh winter and needed help, and they offered them refuge, and maybe they just stayed there. It could be if it was, because remember, Native Americans had a right to be upset with colonists, right? Because they were taking their land. They may have been attacked, and then their bodies' remains were removed. So no one really knows what happened. Or some people think maybe a disease swept through all of them, and because he was gone, I think a year, the remains may have been taken by animals. No one really knows what happened. Zoe. Yeah, because you have to take a boat to get back to England. Yeah. That's the one.
What if they tried to build a raft and then got stranded in the middle?
Maybe. Again, we have no idea what happened, so it's a big mystery.
What if they didn't trust him and then tried to make a boat and it?
Yep, that could have happened. Again, no one knows. It's a big mystery. Okay, let's go to where it says the American Indians. So, the American Indians living near Jamestown, so remember, here's the Jamestown colony. The Indians living near Jamestown belonged to a confederacy of 30 groups headed by a powerful leader named, I think it's Powhatan. Therefore, the colonists referred to all the local Indians as Powhatan. Relations between the colonists and the Powhatan were often tense. One day when John Smith was exploring, he was captured by some Powhatan. According to legend, he was about to be killed when Pocahontas, the daughter of Powhatan, pleaded that he be spared. After that, there was a short time of peace between the colonists and the Powhatan. So you have to remember, oftentimes these tribes, these Native American tribes or American Indian tribes, they would want to make peace with colonists, but then colonists would say, no, this is our land. And then that they learned, or they thought, okay, all colonists are bad or mean. So they would sometimes attack before talking to them, which, if you think about it, if you're trying to survive, it makes sense. But in this case, they captured John Smith, and then Pocahontas said, no, wait, he's different, and then they spared his life. Or so the story goes. Yep, we'll talk about a little bit more on the next page. Okay, then we're going to talk about this drawing we have here of what looks like an American Indian. It says, John White drew this during his year at Roanoke Island. So again, Roanoke, the lost colony. Recent digging in Bertie County, North Carolina, has produced a new idea about what might have happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. The diggers located several artifacts from the period. They included nails and pieces of pottery jars. The dig is near the site of a fort marked on a map that John White drew in 1585 to 1586. When White returned from England, he didn't look for the lost colonists there. Did they go there? Maybe, maybe not. Yes, Drew.
What did they fish with? Their hands or their legs?
They probably had hooks. They may not have had. Fishing poles, but they may have had some sort of string and hooks, or they could have used arrows. Yes, they also could have used that, or spears. So any of those they probably used. Jack L.
Or they could have used logs.
Yeah. Yep, they could have used logs. They also could have used their hands, possibly. Yes, Max?
Where was it?
Let's see. Let me find from the period. It's near the site of a fort marked on a map that John White drew. So it was on a map of his, and there was a fort that he had marked. It doesn't say specifically where it was. Yeah, but he didn't check that out. I don't know. If I was him, I probably would have checked it out. Exactly. So they may have been safe, all lived to be old, and then just passed away. That could have happened. Yes, Mackenzie. Yeah.
Normally, there's sometimes what I use if I don't want to use a rod, I tie rope around my hook, and I just dangle it in the water and wait for something to come.
Yep, exactly. So if they didn't have a pole, they could have just used rope and a hook. Definitely.
Sometimes I anchor my boat, tie the rope on, and then leave.
Yes, definitely. They could have done that. They may have had canoes. Zoe, did you have something? Go ahead.
I have a question.
What's your question?
About the picture that John mentioned.
Yes.
Did you draw that in like color, or did they like fill it in?
So, I'm not 100% sure. They could have. It could have been that, colors fade over time, and this is from long ago. They may have been able to kind of see what colors he used and then use technology to figure out exactly what colors it was and then use that to fill it in. Or, they didn't have, Crayola was not a company during this time, but they had different ways of coloring and making different colors, so it may have been colored in. I don't know for a fact. Drew. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
And also, one more fishing thing is when you tie the ties and then you just wrap it around your hand and you can make it roll out.
Yep, exactly. You can use your arm as a fishing pole. Nice. And Allison. Yep, fishing. Yes. And catch it? Yeah, that's a great thought, Allison. They also could have made nets and used that to fish. Definitely. We're going to keep reading. So, to meet the need for workers, the Jamestown settlers began bringing indentured servants from England. Indentured servants were under contract to work for a person for up to 7 years. After that, they were free to work for themselves. In 1619, the first Africans arrived in the colony. They had been captured in the Caribbean from a Portuguese slave trading ship. Remember how we talked about they were using Native Americans as slaves? Then, because so many of them died, then they started bringing people from Africa. Not okay, but this is part of our history, which is why we learn it. It is not known whether they were treated as indentured servants or slaves. Ultimately, the indentured servant population could not meet the demand for labor in the tobacco fields, and slavery became common. So that meant even if they were treating them as indentured servants, because as an indentured servant you were eventually released, they were running out of indentured servants, which then led to them saying, okay, we're actually going to take these people against their will and we're going to just make them slaves, unfortunately. By 1609, I know it's not fair. By 1609, the merchants who invested in the Jamestown Company had not made any profit. Remember how the merchants bought shares, and if they made money, then the merchants would make money too. Well, they didn't make any profit. They weren't making a lot of money. Then John Rolfe arrived bringing tobacco plants that he had bought in the West Indies. Tobacco had become popular in Europe, but the Jamestown settlers did not like the type grown by the Powhatan. And they thought Rolfe's tobacco was superior. They planted it and eventually sold it all over Europe. It became the first cash crop of the colony. A cash crop is one that is grown to be sold rather than used by the farmer. While in Jamestown, Rolfe fell in love with and married Pocahontas. So that is true. If you ever watched the second Pocahontas movie, she married John. Yes, that was true. So cash crops. Do we have any cash crops today, you guys? So that's a crop that's only farmed to be sold. It's not something that the farmer grows for himself. Do we have any cash crops today? What do you think? Max, what's one? Corn. Do you think farmers eat all of the corn that they grow? No, my gosh, there'll be so much corn. So that could be a cash crop. They eat some, but not all of it. So that's kind of a cash crop. What's another one? Eosius. Cotton, yes. I mean, some farmers, maybe they spin cotton into thread, but most of them, they farm cotton and then sell it for people to spin it into thread. Zoe? Yeah, cucumbers. A lot of food crops, maybe the farmer grows some for themselves, but most of it is for selling. Now, if you have like a backyard garden and you grow cucumbers, are you usually growing those to sell? No. That's for yourself. But when you have a huge crop of it, that's like a cash crop. Addie? Pumpkins would be another one. If you've ever gone to like an apple orchard or a pumpkin patch, they grow those apples and pumpkins to sell. So that could be considered like a cash crop. Layla? Wheat. Yes, that's a great one. Wheat. Up in the Midwest, we have lots of wheat farmers, and so they sell the wheat or they grow the wheat to sell. Allison? Okay. Okay, eggs. One second. So, you're right. Eggs and dairy, there are a lot of farmers who have dairy cows and they have chickens who lay eggs. Well, they're not crops. It's similar because are they going to use all the eggs or all the milk that they get from their dairy cows? Not necessarily. Now, if it's like a small family farm, they have one dairy cow and like 5 chickens, they're probably using that for themselves. Like Uncle Henrik, exactly. Now, if you're on a dairy farm and you have like 50 dairy cows and then maybe you have like 80 chickens, is that going to all go to you as a farmer? No. So it depends on the size, Zoe. You're right. Drew? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can think of it like Kemp's, they make ice cream from dairy, from cows, and they sell it. Those farmers that are selling the milk to them to turn into ice cream, that's kind of like a cash crop, but it's not a crop. It's milk. But you're right, Drew. They sell it to companies like Kemp's. Produce. Thank you. Max. Pretty much anything a farmer makes can be a cash crop if it's big enough. You're exactly right. Chanel.
So my dad and his friend,
Mm-hmm.
They have a farm
Mm.
in their backyard because you know they can buy those big blocks of
Land? Yes.
Yes. They have one thing of land. It's just for the farm, and one side
Cool.
is for the house, and
Yeah.
then they sell it to stores. I know one of the stores they sell it to fresh time.
Oh yes, yes. That's an indoor farmers market, right? Very cool. Jack L.
My uncle used to work for
What do they sell or do? Oh yes, yes. I know what you're talking about. Yes. And on the other side, I'm glad you brought that up. So just like how people can have dairy cows, there are some people who also will have like cattle that they sell for meat. Yes. Mhm. Yep, exactly. Very cool. We're going to keep reading, but we can think of cash crops that we have today, right? Yeah. During this time, tobacco was huge. Tobacco was huge. That was a cash crop. Now, you guys, let's go over to where it says, ready to rock? Okay, let's go over to where it says in 1619. Follow along with me. In 1619, the Jamestown settlers established the House of Burgess. Some people say Burgesses, some people say Burgesses, to make laws and set taxes for the Virginia colony. So you guys, this is kind of a part of how our government got to where it was today, was the establishment of this. In England, a burgess or burgess was someone who represented or acted on behalf of a town. What do we call those people here? If they act on behalf of a town? Max? Well, okay, governor, they act on behalf of a state. How about a town? Mayor. Yes, mayor. So it's similar to a mayor. The House of Burgesses was the first legislature or lawmaking body in England's American colonies. It was also the first example of representative government in the colonies. However, only men who owned property could vote and hold office. Now, this is another part of history we talk about. Has everyone always had rights throughout history? No. During this time, if you were a man and you held property or owned property, you were kind of the only people who had a say. Now, we know today that's not fair, right? Because women and all types of men and women deserve the right to vote, own property, all this. During this time in history, they did not realize that. Frankie.
Basically, back then, it was only, the women race, it was yeah,
Let Frankie talk.
Women aren't that as important.
Yeah.
Now it's all lives.
Exactly.
Everyone.
Exactly. We now realize that all lives matter. All lives deserve the same rights and responsibilities. Exactly. But as we know, during this time, it wasn't that way. Now, you guys, I want to quickly talk about Pocahontas and John Smith because there's just a quick caption. Now, remember, some things are true about Pocahontas and John Smith. Some things are different. It says, Pocahontas saves John Smith. In 1607, John Smith was captured by Powhatan. Many years later, he wrote that Pocahontas had saved his life. He said that he was about to be clubbed to death when Pocahontas pleaded with her father to spare him and threw herself across his body. So in the movie that happened, that was true. Some historians question whether this ever happened. Others think that Smith may have been mistaken and that he was not in danger of death. They think that having his head placed on a stone might have been part of an adoption ceremony. Now, could this be true? No, listen. Did John Smith know all of their customs, do you think? Probably not. He may have thought he was in danger, but it could have actually been a different custom of theirs as a part of their culture. So, will we ever know for a fact what was happening then? No, but we can use what John Smith wrote in his journal, what other people said from that time, and kind of piece clues together.